I hear the people talking. What are they talking about? This world's gone crazy, and I'm trying to find a way out. Nobody knows where we're going, or if we're going at all. Nobody cares if we stand, if we have nowhere to fall. It's a singing symphony, playing as the ship goes down. It's a porcelain epiphany, breaking if it hits the ground. I gotta find a way out. So many questions answered without an answer to tell. Too many things on my mind for anything to go well.
Okay, good evening, guys, and welcome to another segment of Cayman Marl Road's live stream chat. Thank you so much for tuning in. I see quite a few of you already in the broadcast, about 10 persons or so. I'm very, very excited about the discussion this evening. It's a serious discussion yet again. I know we had one last week, but you know what? We can't ever talk about this topic enough as far as I'm concerned, because it's such a critical, important topic, and it's really about trying to make a difference in our communities and trying to ultimately save our children, to be quite frank and to be quite honest, from future abuse. It's about trying to educate the public and really just trying to, I think, get everyone to comprehend and to understand that this is the type of discussion that we need to continually have. You know, it's amazing how many people, in my opinion, seem to be a bit oblivious to how much abuse is occurring in our communities and in surrounding areas. And one of the reasons for that, I think, because there simply isn't enough dialogue. And a lot of us are very uncomfortable having that dialogue and having this discussion, despite the fact that we need to be having it, you know? And so this is a platform that will be, you know, sometimes Cayman Marl Road is gossipy and we have fun with topics and we talk about, you know, the ridiculous things that are on the Marl Road. But unfortunately, on the Marl Road is also child abuse, child sexual abuse, abuse of our teenagers. And so, of course, this is a topic that, you know, we need to have those discussions on yet again. And there have been so many things happening in our communities that really make this a topic that unfortunately will never go away. You know, I was listening to Oprah's interview the other day that she had with the two alleged victims from the Michael Jackson situation. And she said that she did over 200 shows. I think it was 217 or 271 shows on the topic of child sexual abuse during her very long run that she had her talk show. And quite amazingly, this was the first time in all of that 25 years that she has gotten the negative feedback that she has. And it shows you that despite what we say, there are certain people in our community who will get protection, you know, because of who they are, because they are people of position, because they have wealth, or even because they're celebrities. They have a certain amount of protection, a certain buffer that the average person doesn't always get. And to me, that's quite amazing. And that buffer will protect them, even from otherwise logical people who will say, you know, this situation just isn't right. They're going to make an exception in those particular cases. So it's disheartening, but I'm really very pleased this evening to have joining me in studio. I'm going to bring up Nicole here on screen. We have Dr. Nicole Eastman, who's actually a survivor of abuse on more than one occasion, unfortunately. And she's joining us this evening in order to share with our Cayman Marl Road live stream viewers some of her own experiences and her own personal ordeal. She's been a guest on Good Morning America, and she has spoken out for quite some time, trying to share what she has endured on a very personal level. And because of that, she has been ostracized by people in her family and by people in her community. And, you know, at one point, she actually said that speaking up about child abuse has almost cost her her life. But she continues to speak up. She continues to be vocal on this topic. And I think that the lesson there from Nicole is that we all have a voice, and we may not be able to use it in exactly the same way, but we can find how best we can utilize that. Nicole has also done a series of workshops called Breaking Free, Finding Purpose for Your Pain. And so we'll learn a little bit more about her on a personal level, but Nicole is an actual doctor. I want to make sure that people get that she's a medical doctor. And she is a wife and a mother of 2 young children. So Nicole, welcome to the program this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. And
Awesome.
I haven't gotten any messages that anyone can't hear us today. So I think the audio is probably quite good.
Okay, wonderful. I appreciate this opportunity to serve your audience, and any opportunity that presents itself to me where hopefully my voice can positively impact others. It's an appreciated opportunity that I don't take for granted.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. Let's just sort of, go way back to the very beginning of what you've endured. And again, I really appreciate you, because I can imagine how much it takes to talk about something so incredibly personal, and to share it with people out there who a lot of them don't even know who you are. But give us an idea of where it all began for you. How did you become victimized, and what was your situation?
Okay, so just so people know, this morning to prepare myself, because this is probably the most difficult live interview I've ever done. This is not easy. I definitely feel anxious right now, and I'm going to speak to that emotion. But this morning I wrote down, and I have 5 pages, and I'm going to breeze through it, but I have 5 pages of the different forms of abuse that I've experienced in my life from the time that I was a child. Just to give people a bigger picture of me, I am 37 years old. Many times people say I don't look my age. I also do not look like what I've gone through in life. I did that whole 10-year challenge, and I said thank you that I don't look like everything I've survived, because I would be unrecognizable. This has been a hard journey with a lot of pain and a lot of hardship and a lot of loss. And just because somebody can appear confident and happy on the outside, it doesn't mean that they haven't done a hell of a lot of work to get to where they're at. Mm-hmm. So within what I wrote down, I have it broken up, just for a summary, into 5 areas of abuse. So the first, it starts with childhood abuse. And within my home, I experienced verbal, emotional, and physical abuse. And then I go on and I do talk about the incident that I had where I was sexually abused as a child. I didn't actually publicly talk about this until age 37, after seeing the Kavanaugh hearing and why people don't report. And so I can share about that. But I was 12. And then I also talk about abuse of power. And I have 2 incidents of that. And I think both of those are related to narcissistic abuse, which I've also experienced within extended family. Right. And finally, I have attached to that the institutional abuse, which goes with the culture of silence, which is tied between the Larry Nassar case, the largest, biggest known sports history pedophile, nothing to be proud about. And that's attached to my former medical school dean from Michigan State University, who sexually assaulted me as a 4th-year medical student and as an adult.
Wow.
And I also share, because I don't maintain a victim mindset, I hope that I can bring a message of hope tonight for people to stay strong, which is really wise advice that I received as a little girl, and just some lessons to be learned so that people can recognize abuse and hopefully see the signs and help prevent abuse and to overcome abuse and to be able to thrive in life and to be able to experience joy and peace and good stuff in life. So that's the overview. As a child, I'm a sensitive person. People in K-Moms and K-Moms Buy and Sell might not realize how sensitive of a person I am. I also was told I talk a lot as a little girl. And in addition to that, I'm an empath. I feel other people's pain. So that all goes together. And it explains why I couldn't stay silent to abuse as a little girl. So from the time that I was a little girl, I was called stupid. I don't know how much profanity is allowed on Cayman Marl Road, but
well, it's the Marl Road, so I mean, feel free to just be as honest as you can.
Okay, well, I'm going to go there, and I haven't gone there before, and there might be people listening in that don't want to hear what I have to say, and I can't be sorry for that because it's my journey, and it can't be denied or minimized, and I want to heal more, and one thing I always say is that healing does not come through silence. So as a little girl, from as young as I can remember, I was called stupid. Growing up, I was called a liar when I wasn't lying. I was called a bitch. I was called a cunt. I was called a stupid bitch. I experienced a lot of screaming, yelling, cussing, slam cabinets. I was hit. I was punched. I one time had the strongest hands that I knew wrapped around my neck. I'd hear screaming at my mom and those same names and threats for divorce. And from my bed, I would always yell out as a little girl to stop because I couldn't take it. It was too much for me. And I remember being fearful, the feeling of never knowing what was going to set it off. But understanding, even from the time I was a little girl, that it was a cycle of abuse. It was learned behavior. And even though it got me hit more and called more names, I continued to speak out against it. And I loved my dad.
Can I just pause you right there for a second, Nicole? I mean, obviously, you've jumped in at the deep end here, and we can already see how incredibly emotional you are. And I mean, it's already bringing me to tears, to be honest. Give us an idea, what age were you when this started? Because so many of us grew up in dysfunctional homes and dysfunctional environments. And, you know, we see the fighting and the yelling, and that becomes our normal.
Yeah.
And we don't recognize that there's something wrong with that that's not how people are supposed to live. You know, that you're not supposed to say those things to your children. You're not supposed to call them names. You're not supposed to degrade them and, you know, call them stupid or use profanity with your children. But how old were you? Do you remember when it started?
I mean, I remember getting hit for spilling my drink, for accidents. As a young child, I called the cops one time in middle school.
Wow.
I was never hit after that.
Wow.
it ended up preventing my dad from being able to get a permit to carry a concealed weapon. And I prayed for my dad from the time I was a little girl. I didn't have a deep relationship in faith, but I always, in times of emergency, I'd call out. And I was raised Catholic, but I didn't have the relationship in Christ that I have today. But my relationship with my dad improved after that, and I went on to medical school. And
do you have any idea why your dad was so angry and why he was doing some of the things that he did? I mean, most of this is learned behavior. So in my personal experience, I recognize that it just goes from one generation to the next. If someone doesn't consciously break the cycle of,
are you there?
that is significant. Even when we think, and I used to watch Oprah a lot back in the day, and I would see people get on there and they would talk about how they were abused and they grew up in these dysfunctional homes, and they kind of promised themselves that they would never be a product of that dysfunction. But despite their best efforts, they still fell into it and they still became dysfunctional adults. And then you continue it on to the next generation, because as you become parents, you're dysfunctional around those children. So do you have any insight into what might have happened to your dad? Was just another case of, his parents were that way and he grew up that way and that's just how it was?
Well, I wish I could have a deeper conversation with him now. Mm-hmm. But what I do know is that growing up, what I was told was that the kids would be punished when they did something wrong by their mom. And then when their dad would get home, they would then again be punished for the same thing. And throughout my dad's family, there's a lot of hot tempers. There's a lot of underlying anger. And I don't know all of the background story, but it was a cycle of abuse. Mm-hmm. When I started my third year, I graduated high school in 1999. And 2 weeks before I graduated high school, my grandma passed away, but she was my best friend and my mentor. She was my saving grace. She had countless kitchen table talks like we're having right now, and I could tell her absolutely anything and everything. Stuff that would probably kill most grandmas, I could tell her, because she was my safe place. And so she passed away in 1999, 2 weeks before I graduated high school. I was 17. I was supposed to go to Central Michigan, but it was not a good time for me to go away from home. I was codependent on my home. That was dysfunctional, but from the outside, people didn't know. My dad was a very loved man, and he was a very hardworking man, and he did a lot for other people. But behind closed doors, there was a lot of pain. There was a lot of unresolved pain. So then I ended up going to a community college for the first 2 years of school, and I did my prereqs, and I went to Wayne State on an academic scholarship and finished my Bachelor's of Science in Psychology with pre-med studies. Then I worked before medical school as a personal trainer and a certified group fitness instructor, which was an outlet for me. Mm-hmm. And then I started medical school in 2006. So in 2008, I was at the beginning of my third year medical school, and I went to my dad's house on Father's Day, and I brought him a breakfast, and he came to me that morning, and I had seen him outside. He was having shortness of breath, and he came in. He was overweight, and I know that bothered him. And he was cutting the grass, but I had seen signs because I had moved from the East Lansing area back to where I grew up to start my hospital rotations. which you start at third year medical school. And he came to me on Father's Day of 2008. And I will never forget this. And I will always be grateful for his humility and courage. And he came to me in the kitchen and he said, Nicole, I just want to apologize to you for how I was with you when I was growing up. And I told my dad that I had already forgiven him, but that it was really scary as a little girl to see my big, strong dad come at me. And I also told him that I knew it was a cycle. I understood from the time that I was young that he was the way he was, partly because of how he was raised. And I was who I was at that time in my journey, partly because of how I was raised. And then weeks after that, just after having an engagement party, which ended up getting called off, on July 13th, 2008, he had a massive stroke. And on July 17th, 2008, at the age of just turned 53, I held and felt my dad die.
Wow.
And I loved my dad. And I saw things in his passing that bless me now. And I have that apology. And I have a man who was able to take a good hard look at himself and his pain. And he was able to bring himself to his daughter and to truly apologize. It wasn't a, if I did this, then type statement. It was a full ownership. I am sorry for how I was when you were a little girl. And nobody can take that from me. My family, who has not thought kindly of me since I shared this about a year ago, I pray for them. There's still evidence, unless my mom changed the door, of my dad who punched a hole through the door before he came in and continuously punched my leg when I was a little girl with my mom standing in the door. And I thought I hated her in that moment because she didn't stop him. And I think about so much abuse and I see how it's enabled. And a lot of the times that I had experiences with my dad, my mom worked full time. She wasn't home with us. I had my grandma, and then there were times, my mom's a hardworking woman too. I don't wish ill on her. She's obviously got her own pain, and I pray that my relationship with her can be like the one I ended up gaining with my dad before he passed away. So through all of that, I had built up, I wasn't like this before my accident. I had a lot of walls built up around me, and it was to keep people out. You would have never caught me dead coming on somewhere and sharing my experiences with anybody. I was seen on the outside as this like confident, organized parties, like go out, let's have fun type of girl. And I never let people in because I didn't want anybody to be able to hurt me.
Yep. And do you find, I know you were mentioning, some of your accomplishments, you were into fitness and doing like personal training, you're in medical school, you were doing all of these things, typical kind of type A personality. Do you think you were trying to overcompensate for what was really happening in your life? Like what was really going on?
Well, I didn't understand about giftedness until after I moved to Cayman either. I was the little girl who was told I was stupid all the time.
Right.
And through the accident that I had that I can talk about later, I ended up having to have neurocognitive testing. And that revealed that I am far from stupid. Even having had a concussion, the neuropsychologist stated that I had the highest score of any doctor he had ever tested. And that was hard for me. And I was a perfectionist. And I'll always be my toughest critic. but I love learning. So that's part of giftedness, this inability to stay silent to injustice, the being too sensitive, the being too talkative. That's part of giftedness. Giftedness, and I think that Cayman definitely needs to take a look at this within the schools. But giftedness is not just intellect. It also is emotional intelligence. And that is likely part of the reason why I could never stay silent, even as a little girl. However, I did stay silent to child sexual abuse. So at age 12, I was a student ambassador. And I've never shared this like spoken. I wrote it out, kept it within my friends on Facebook in the last year. So I was a student ambassador in Michigan for the People to People program, which was started by President Eisenhower. And it was based on academics and being, a goody two-shoes and sitting in the front of the class and loving learning. And anyway, I was in Europe. I spent nearly a month when I was 12 in Spain, France, Germany, and Switzerland. And I was sitting next to a boy on the bus on a trip, and he digitally penetrated my vagina with his fingers. And I was 12, and I didn't know what was going on. I had never been touched that way before. And I ended up going and talking to the group leader afterwards in her hotel room. And I don't know at that time if they had mandatory reporters, but what she told me when I told her what happened was, that's what boys do when they like you.
Wow.
But I was 12 and I was a child. And he was also a minor. But at the age of a minor, you don't have the ability to consent. I did not want that to happen to me at 12 years old. I was a very sheltered little girl in a dysfunctional upbringing, if that makes any sense. And so it was made to be normal. Just like what I experienced in my home. I thought that was normal. Like every kid grows up like this. So I never told anybody about that. My husband was the first one I told about that. And I didn't even tell my grandma. I think I was probably ashamed. But that is the part of the reason why people don't report. One, it's just not having an understanding. And I look at Larry Nassar's victims. Currently, to date, they range from age 8 to age 40. And the woman who is 40 is Sarah Klein, and she was actually in Oprah's audience. She was the blonde woman who the camera zoomed on a couple times. So that is my child sex abuse.
Can I just ask you a few questions, Nicole, about that? I'm shocked time and time again when I hear people, in particular parents, say, if this happens to my child, of course they're going to tell me. They make it sound like it's so easy for someone who has been victimized to come forward and to share it with someone. In your case, you actually did tell an adult and they shut you down, essentially.
Yep.
And where it's a situation where I think the reason why you were able to tell, and again, I've done considerable research on this, and I wish everyone had the desire to learn as much about this topic as I did, because I think with the education, you empower yourself and you're able to protect and see things that ordinarily you wouldn't see. So in that case, that young man, it doesn't sound like you knew him. You didn't have any sort of relationship with him previous to that. It was just a situation where he did it, and you went to the first adult available to you.
Uh-oh. Okay. I see you, or I don't see you. All I see here is myself, which is awkward. So I don't know how I can see and hear you, Sandy. Okay. Continue speaking. Let's see. Okay. Sandy said to keep speaking, but I don't see or hear her. I can see the team chat. So Sandy, let me know what I need to do. I can see you, Nicole Eastman. Hi, Verity. Can you hear me? If we can't get connected, I suppose I can continue going through until Sandy can reconnect with me. But if somebody can let me know that they can hear me. Let me see. Let me see if I can close out of this and see if it, how do you get out of this? See all, okay, okay. I can't see, okay, Debs, cannot see and hear Sandy. Neither can I. Verity said that she can see me and she can hear me. Okay, so I don't know what's going on with this, and this is really awkward taking over Sandy's platform, but she told me to continue speaking. So I'm going to do that. Okay, so going through, so I share the child sexual abuse, and in respect to time, just in case this doesn't get fixed up, I'm going to go through the rest of what I shared within what I wrote this morning to prepare myself. So I spoke about childhood abuse. I spoke about child sexual abuse. Now I'm going to talk about abuse of power as an adult. So I share with everybody that I started medical school in 2006. My dad passed away. Thank you, Debs. I'll keep sharing this. This is really important, and I hope it makes a difference. So I started medical school in 2006. And now I'm going to talk about something that's I've been in the national media for. I've been all over the national news outlets between ESPN, Washington Post, the Detroit News, the New York Post, the Today Show, NBC News, Detroit Free Press, MLive, Lansing State Journal, The Athletic, Wood TV, New York Times, on radio shows, podcasts. I did one interview with Cayman 27 about this. So in 2007, as a second-year medical school student, I believe it was, I had a flu shot clinic as a medical student. And so I went to the Capitol building, and my medical school dean came up to the side of me, and I will end up having to testify about this in court in May or June. So he came up to the side of me and started talking to me about sex, which was really awkward because this is my medical school dean. And he is a doctor, and he's affiliated with the military, and he brings in a lot of money to Michigan State University. So he started telling me about different things, and he said to me that it was easier to get a female drunk and then to have sex with her. And you just kind of do the smile and nod and don't really have anything to say about that. It's really uncomfortable. And he also told me about how he had a student in his office one time who was caught cheating, and that she was really, in a tough spot, and she was begging him basically, but he didn't finish how that meeting ended. So one of the responsibilities I took on as a medical student was the class of 2010 alumni relations representative. And I had one meeting with a woman who worked in alumni relations. And she told me, I told her what he had said to me at the Capitol building. And she told me in a defeated type of tone, Nicole, everybody knows about his behavior and nothing ever changes. So his behavior was normalized. And once again, I spoke to a trusted adult and nothing happened. So then in third year medical school, like I shared, you leave the first 2 years of like academic bookwork and you go to a base hospital. And so I went back down to where I pretty much grew up. And then my dad died the very first week of my third year medical school. And I didn't take time off. I kept pushing forward. I knew that's not what my dad would have wanted for me. And fourth year medical school came around. And in February of 2010, I was at a function called the MOCF Ball. And my dean came up from behind me and he grabbed the right butt cheek that belonged to me. He did not ask to touch me. And I turned around to see my medical school dean. And then the next person that I saw to the right diagonal of me was his wife and other faculty members. And I remember feeling like a deer caught in headlight. I was humiliated. And my now husband was with me at the time, and I shared with him what had happened. And then I had shared with a couple other physicians that I worked with at the time at my base hospital what had happened, and they had heard other stories about him. Then the next time that I saw him was when I graduated medical school in May of 2010, and I am pictured shaking his hand after walking across the stage for graduation. I never thought that I'd ever speak out about that incident publicly. So then in August of 2010, I started my post-medical school graduation, my post-doctorate training. And then in November of 2010, November 26, 2010, my husband and I were married here for our destination wedding. That's a long story into how we found out this island even exists. But it's a beautiful Caymanian woman that life placed me on an airplane seat next to. So I'm thankful for Danya Miller. So then went back to Michigan 2 weeks later. So between August to December of 2010, I started getting harassed by my director of medical education. And I spoke out about that too, because now I had $250,000 worth of medical school debt, and this man was trying to ruin my career, which he had done to other people. His harassment started happening as soon as he found out that I would be finishing my medical training at a different hospital, which would have been Oakwood in Dearborn, Michigan. Even though I had 2 years worth of excellent evaluations from my third and fourth year base hospital rotations, as soon as he found out that I would be transferring programs, he told me that I was incompetent. So on December 15th, 2010, per the directions of the hospital administration, I was going to get my most recent evaluation from a family medicine physician named Dr. Zucker. And on my way back to the hospital, 2 exits away from exiting, I got hit by a semi-truck at 65 miles per hour. I remember 2 points of impact. He first hit me from behind. My car spun counterclockwise. He was coming directly towards my driver's side door. Big 18-wheeler, red semi-truck. My car spun just enough that the second hit was near my gas tank. So I'm lucky I didn't blow up. The one witness, she was heading down to Children's Hospital. She said that I went under the trailer of the truck. The left front mirror was hanging down, and there was a hole through the front grille of my Chrysler Sebring sedan. But I don't know how that happened. What I remember next was facing oncoming traffic. Like, you're oncoming traffic, and I'm facing you. And then the butt end of the truck was like this. And time feels like it's so slow. And I just kept seeing car after car go to the side of me. So I thought that I was going to die. And I didn't know what death was going to be like. But I asked God to help me. And then I didn't die. But I lost everything I identified with. My sense of self, my physical health, my emotional health, my career. I experienced the darkest days that I would wish upon nobody, where I felt completely alone and broken and hopeless, and I questioned why I had to survive. I thought it would have been easier to have died than to survive and go through what I was going through every single day. I remember being in bed, consumed with physical and psychological pain. And I remember thinking, if I can get through this, I'd like to be a voice of hope for other people. So this today is an answered prayer for me, and I can't believe where I'm at today. However, this man, my former director of medical education, people said he was irreplaceable. Because of my accident, Dr. Zucker, who I picked up my evaluation from, she told me, she's like, Nicole, you're going to want to get an attorney. You don't know how this is going to affect you. And she was right. 8 years later, and it's still affecting me. And I went through a lawsuit, which didn't finish up, and it was found in my favor after going in front of a panel of judges. My honesty that I had from the time I was a little girl, it prevailed. And I went through depositions. My phone records were subpoenaed because the truck driver lied and said I was on my phone, and my records proved that I was honest. I wasn't doing anything wrong. It was completely outside of my control, and it affected every single aspect of my life. Speaking up against abuse in medicine nearly cost me my life, and then I'm continuing to do it. So he ended up, when they subpoenaed all my records, I ended up finding out from other colleagues that he ended up getting fired. And some people thanked me, and other people thought I was an evil person for stating that it was an answered prayer, because he could no longer try to do what he was doing to me, which nearly cost me my life. So I obviously wasn't thinking about my medical school dean while I was going through hell and back. We ended up moving here when I was 6 months pregnant with my son in 2012, August 29th, 2012. I was still going through the lawsuit with the trucking company. And in addition to that, I was dealing with the Hartford Group, who is a long-term disability company that I gained when I started employment at the hospital, St. John's Hospital, where I was employed as a resident physician. And so I'm currently, after going through their independent medical exams and their re-traumatization and their gains, I currently have a disability attorney in Michigan fighting for me at the level of the U.S. federal court in regards to that. The insurance company abuse that many victims face. So now there's so many layers to this. So now December, I'm going to take you to December of 2017. I saw in the Detroit News that my former medical school dean, the guy who thought it was appropriate to grab my butt at this medical function, he was stepping down for medical reasons. But this was also at the time that Larry Nassar was gaining national attention. And so I felt really compelled at that time when I read that article to write, oh, well, he is a sexual predator too. But I talked to my mom at that time. This is before I spoke about my dad publicly. And I was like, I don't want to get involved with this. This is gaining national media attention. So then it kept weighing on me. And then I ended up watching the entire trial, starting in Judge Aquilina's courtroom. And I listened to over 150 victim impact statements by still legally aged girls and young women. And as a mom to a now 3- and 6-year-old, there was at least one male that Larry Nassar also abused. This is a doctor. This is somebody who was given the privilege of power. He was given the title of somebody who should be healing. In medical school, we take the Hippocratic oath of doing no harm. And I was so disgusted by the violation of these little girls. So after watching all of the impact statements, I went to Rachel Denhollander's page, who I've since spoken to. She may end up at the trial for Strample. And I read her open letter that she had to my former dean, William Strample. And I then read what he replied to her, and he mocked her. And he also put in emails that he was on Larry Nassar's side. So after I read that, I went from feeling compelled to deeply convicted in my spirit to break my silence. I then reached out to Jacob Denhollander, who is her husband, and I then spoke to Judge Aquilina on Twitter, who both said that what I experienced was sexual assault and it is illegal. William Strample and MSU enabled Larry Nassar's abuse. And this abuse does have to stop. And that's why I continue to speak. And so I ended up about a year ago, I first started speaking with the Michigan State Police, the detective/sergeant. And they're wonderful. From the beginning, she's like, I got information about you. If you don't want to talk about it to me, I won't message you again. And I messaged her right back. There's no turning back for me with this. This is such an important, deep societal issue that is non-discriminatory. Nobody is free from being afflicted from it. And so then I spoke on the day of my grandpa's funeral. I spoke with the Attorney General's office. It was a Friday for the first time. And then on that Monday, I got a call or a message from the detective/sergeant saying, guess who we're going to pick up? And William Strample was arrested. And since then, he had a preliminary hearing. He was bound over on all 4 charges, including quid pro quo and using his office, his office of power to his advantage. And there was another medical student. He grabbed her left butt cheek, grabbed my right one, her left one. And he also had very inappropriate conversations with other medical students.
Nicole?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry, I'm back, and I just want to jump in a little bit.
Sure.
One of the things that I want to kind of direct and focus on, because this keeps coming up time and time again, why victims don't speak out as soon as something happens. And what I was saying, unfortunately, when we got disconnected was, in your case as a child, when you had your first instance of sexual molestation, and
12.
One of the things I want to say to parents and the people who are listening to this broadcast is they need to understand that 25% or a quarter of all child molestation cases are actually committed. The offender is another child or teenager. So sometimes they're a little bit older, sometimes they're the same age as the child, but those are minors who are doing this. So minor is the perpetrator. And I think that when that happens, unfortunately, again, it becomes another reason why adults want to dismiss it, which is so incredibly sad. But in this case, you didn't actually have any sort of a relationship with this young man, based on what I understand. There was no grooming that had occurred. He just outright sexually molested you there, and the first thing you did was told the first adult that you thought you could trust, and they shut you down.
Yep.
And I think so many people don't get that even when they're having these discussions on social media and they're attacking victims, whether it's the alleged victims of R. Kelly or Michael Jackson or whatever, the comments that they're making about victims and about people wanting to get rich and people trying to get money out of these types of situations, there are people who've been victimized who are reading these comments.
Yep.
And they're reading these posts, and they will go in their shell even that much more. They're not going to come forward because they know historically how society has treated victims. Society has what's the word I'm trying to find? Vilified the victims. They don't tend to vilify the perpetrators. They want to excuse their behavior.
Yep.
And, they also don't understand that when it's a situation of the person having groomed you or someone that you had a relationship with, that you loved, that you cared about, it's that much more difficult for you to speak out. Because there are other people, like Debbie just said, 80% of her family no longer speak to her because she spoke out.
You're re-victimized.
You're taking that chance of ostracizing yourself.
Yep.
From the rest of the family. And most people don't want that. Most people will remain silent.
Yep.
They're thinking more about the other people in their lives than themselves. Yep. They will continue to hurt and to sleep with this trauma as opposed to trying to start the healing process, getting professional help, talking about it, because they're concerned about how will it impact all of the other people around me. And a lot of people can't come to terms with what has happened with them until the abuser has died. And so when people say, oh, well, this person's dead, why do we care? Like, I am just so flabbergasted by those types of comments.
Sandy, I did not speak about my relationship with my dad behind closed doors for 10 years after his death.
Right.
One, I loved my dad unconditionally. Yeah. Two, my dad and I ended up gaining a healthy relationship before he died. Three, I'd give anything to have him back. And four, it's uncomfortable. Who wants to tell people that you were called those names as a little girl and you were hit? And I had a hockey stick brought at me when I grew up at the ice arena. And
wow,
they're painful memories. Who would choose that? And so, when people say, that I've been on the news and I've been on a lot of media, but when you've been given so much hardship in your life and you know what it feels like to be completely alone and broken, and when you have fought and fought and fought and fought to break free from so much damn abuse from the time you were a little girl, and when, your family doesn't have choice words for you because you spoke the truth. And my brothers were young at the time of it. I was in middle school when I called the cops on my dad. And so they were little. We're all 3 years apart, and I was the oldest. So they were little. And I saw things that happened with them too, which was abuse. And that's not my story to share. So I will leave that at that. But in every single instance of abuse, I tried to tell somebody. And from the time I was a little girl, people have been trying to silence my voice. And I understand that there are some people who would be considered like sociopaths or psychopaths like Chris Watts who find pleasure in other people's pain, but I'm an empath and I feel deeply. I had to learn that everybody else's issues aren't mine to fix because people would dump their crap on me. And then at the time of my accident, I felt so completely alone and broken, and I didn't feel understood. And I was told I was selfish for starting self-care and a journey of healing. And I've gone through a lot of therapy. There is no weakness in crying. I was told growing up, crying, I'll give you something to cry for. There is no weakness in sharing the truth, no matter who doesn't want to hear it. There is no weakness in trying to heal. I have chronic pain. I've had pain every single day of my life since I spoke up against my director of medical education, which nearly killed me by that semi truck. And I would not wish that upon my worst. Oh, I don't let people be my enemies. I don't know. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. What I have gone through, my life has not been easy. My appearances are so deceiving. I shared in Caymans the other day, if I could count how many times people have misjudged who I am, what my heart is, what I've gone through in life based on what I look like on a little dot on Facebook. I mean, I wish I got paid for that. But in terms of, you talked about, how people will say litigants and victims are seeking money. First of all, there's a really big problem in the United States with statutes of limitations. I have absolutely no incentive to speak up about William Strample other than for doing the right thing and to protect other little girls and little boys who could be similarly groomed and victimized. Because of statutes of limitations, I have absolutely no way to collect compensation. So there goes that theory. This is definitely not the type of thing that somebody would seek attention for. So there goes that theory. So statutes of limitations, they're terrible. You look at the Catholic Church, now the Southern Baptist Church. I've experienced abuse within the church. That's why I watch it online. There's a lot of legalism I've experienced here in Cayman. There's a lot of people who are religious and can quote scripture, but they don't have a relationship of faith in Christ. When you have that relationship, which I found in bed in my darkest moments after getting plowed over by that semi-truck, when I heard, you're not alone, you have God, and I truly came to understand who Jesus was and I accepted him into my heart. Mind you, I had a completely different lifestyle before my accident. If somebody would have came to me, actually they did. At Wayne State in undergrad, they bring you these green little Bibles. I was like, I probably threw one or two of them in the garbage, and that, hope I don't go to hell for that one. But there's the grace of Jesus, and that is what is so important, and that is what I have learned. And my whole life has changed through my accident and my faith. But yeah, I've experienced, I grew up Catholic. I heard racism within the Catholic Church. Then the sexual abuse stuff came, and I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm no longer Catholic, and I was anti-religion. And now I'm anti-religion and pro-Jesus. So if I sound crazy right now because you don't have that relationship, I understand, because I was there in the past. But I've gone through hell and back, and I have peace and joy and so much gratitude. And every single day I wake up and I give thanks to God for a new day of life, and I go to bed and I thank God for another day of life, and it gives me peace. And that's a personal journey, and that's something that I don't think anybody should push on anybody else. But that is a safe space, like my grandma was. Through my grandma, I experienced God's love. That's the God that I serve. So that's one of the things that I gained through all of this.
Right.
So, I don't know. And looking back, I shared with my husband yesterday, I was like, and looking back at everything I've gone through, and I have a couple quick takeaways about overcoming abuse, but I share with my husband, had it not been for, and we could talk about the issues my husband and I have dealt with. We had trauma 2 weeks after we were married, and then family dynamics. It has been a trip. But if I would not have found my faith, and had God not blessed me with 2 beautiful children, I don't know if I'd still be here. I don't know if I'd be strong enough on my own. That has been my foundation and my motivation. And I love being a mom because it was something that very easily could have not happened in my life.
Right. Nicole, we're going to just start to wrap things up a little bit here. I mean, we could really have this conversation for hours on end. I mean, you have personally experienced so much. And I appreciate you coming on the program and sharing just a little bit even of what you have shared with us. I mean, there's so many takeaways from your story, whether it was a situation with your dad and the dynamics of that home environment. It's one of the reasons why, as an adult, I have changed my mind about corporal punishment. And I know that's a very touchy topic for a lot of people, but, I can't reconcile in my head that you could ever lay your hands on a child in the name of love. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I see so many instances where it goes wrong, and where the children were negatively impacted as a result of that. So there's
How
so
do
many
you
things.
draw a line? You know, Sandy, how do you draw a line between, you know, the whole crap of spare the rod, spoil the child. That's guidance, like what my grandma gave me. It's saying, Nicole, that was a poor decision. I'm disappointed, and this is a true story. I'm disappointed in your choice. It doesn't mean you go beat the shit out of them in the name of love. That's not love. And in the movie The Shack, they did a really good job of talking about that.
And you know what's amazing, Nicole, is recently I saw a toddler, 2 years old, lash out at me and like hit at me. And in that split moment, I saw 5 seconds before that where the parents were trying to chastise that child by grabbing it and hitting its hand. And so when it was upset, how it responded to me, not giving it something it wanted, was by physical violence.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of that type of situation, violence begets violence. And we as a community need to accept. And like you've said, the rod of correction. No, you've never seen, if you take it literally, a pasture out or a sheep herder out in the pasture beating a sheep with its rod. That's not how the rod of correction works at all. Yeah. So I think there's so many things that we've been misguided about, but just to kind of stay on topic a little bit, because that's a whole other discussion that we can definitely have. What would you say to any young person that could potentially be seeing this podcast? Of course, this will stay up on Facebook and people can go and view it. We're going to share it on the website page. So if any of you, want to see the videos, please, share them. If somebody doesn't even have access to Facebook, they can still watch it from our website. What would you want to say to any young person that is listening to this? If something traumatic has happened to them, what peace can they find? What can they do?
It took me until I was an adult. I was living in Moon Bay, where I got evicted from, was on the news for that, because I spoke up against bullying within that complex. A woman that I went to med school with, I don't know why she thought to send it to me, but she wrote to me and she's like, Nicole, I just want you to know that you're worthy. I had to learn that I was worthy and deserving of the love that I give to other people. I have deep love in my heart for people. And I would think about how I have faith in Christ, and I would say, well, I'm forgiven, so how can I forgive someone else? But what that led to was me being a punching bag, and I kept forgiving, and there was no repentance. There was no changed behavior. So I actually grabbed it because I wanted to show it. I'm not getting paid to share this, but this book changed my life. A pastor and then another woman that I know who has faith like I do shared this book with me. It's called Boundaries, and it's by Dr. Cloud and Dr. Townsend. And it talks about healthy boundaries and not tolerating abuse and recognizing abuse and learning to say no and understanding that you can love somebody and forgive them from a distance. You don't need to continue. If somebody is going to keep abusing you and you're going to stay in that situation, you have part to play in it. And I'm not blaming people who are like in domestic abuse situations, because I know how difficult it is to even get out of that. I stood next to a woman while she left this island after her husband beat her before he went to work in the morning with her 2 little boys. And her truth saw her through. And I used to say, work on your marriage, like Paige Patterson type of crap that you have heard. And he lost his position within the Southern Baptist Church. But when it comes down to abuse and it comes down to somebody's safety, that's not what God wants for his children. And you have to be wise too. You have to have discernment. And so in certain cases, I think the most wise choice is to get out of an abusive relationship, because I told her, if you don't leave, I think you're going to end up out in that sea. Yeah. And thank God she got away.
Yes. Amazing.
So know you're worthy. Know you're worthy, and trust. If you're being silenced, know there's a real reason why people try to silence you too. It's so hard. I listen to TD Jakes, and he's talked about that. Like, if you're being attacked, like your voice is being attacked, it's because what you're speaking is likely truth, and people don't want to hear the truth. It is hard. This journey has been hard. Choosing healing has been hard, but it's, what other choice do you have? Stay in dysfunction? Right. I don't want my kids to grow up in that.
Yeah.
And I've had to be really self-aware, and I've had to catch myself, because behaviors I saw from my dad, I've repeated them sometimes, and I've had to say no. And I've grown. I am so grateful for where God has allowed me to get today as a gentle mom. I hate when people call their kids bad too. Kids are not bad. Maybe a choice is inherently not correct or poor, or the choice is bad, but the person, unless they're something seriously chemically off balance, they're innocent, and we need to protect children in their innocence.
Right. And, you know, Nicole, we didn't even get to discuss narcissists, which we have a lot of them here on this island.
Yeah, I've experienced that too.
And maybe we can book a future date to kind of have that discussion. I do have another young lady that I've been trying to get onto the program who wants to talk about her personal relationship with a narcissist and how that impacted, you know, her as an adult. But, you know, we have these very complex relationships and emotions as adults that we're trying to navigate. And yet somehow we expect children to do a better job at it than we do, which to me is absolutely amazing. And
that's what I always say. That's what I always say. Make sure you're holding yourself to a higher standard than you are holding a developing child.
Exactly. And that's why I never can understand why people want to try to blame children, whether they're 15, 16, 17 years old, for things that adults are doing and manipulating situations to try to get that child into a sexual relationship with them. Because that child hasn't had, I don't care how fast they are, as Caribbean people like to say, that child has not had the benefit of life experiences.
No, and let me say, somebody made a comment to me on your page about, us Caymanians and Caribbean people, I don't care where you're from. Abuse is abuse. And just because something has been culturally woven in as normal, like what I thought was normal growing up in my home, it doesn't mean it's okay. And it doesn't mean that there isn't a place for healing and growth and cycles of abuse being broken.
Exactly. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Nicole. Like I said, I hope that we can have future discussions because there is so much that's there. I hope that the takeaway this evening for everyone who's tuned in, who's been listening, is that not everyone has the balls, so to speak out and to be in a platform like this. But those of us who do, we take our hits, we take our licks for it, and we still do it anyway, because I think that you do have a sense of a higher purpose in life and a calling. And it's not something that you're always comfortable talking about, especially when people don't get it, because, they may think, well, are you trying to be boastful? Like, what's this all about? Sometimes I share with my close friends that years ago, when I first started acupuncture, and it was because I was in a lot of physical pain. I had an injury that I'd been trying to manage for like years. And just out of desperation, I was in Miami and I passed by a little I saw the sign Chinese acupuncture, and I went in there and I said, listen, I couldn't even lift my leg in the car. Like, I'd use my hand to lift my leg in the car. That's how much pain I was in. And I was trying to finish up my my master's degree and trying to get started in my doctorate. So I just went in there. I said, the worst that could happen is I'm going to waste my $100, my $75, whatever it was. And, I'll just move on, keep trying painkillers, whatever. And, the guy did the acupuncture, but he'd actually been trained in Eastern medicine. And he said to me, as he was doing the acupuncture, it's almost like he did a little bit of a spiritual reading or something. And he said, I'm picking up a lot about you. And he said, you're a person who is way ahead of your time with a lot of things, but you have to accept that you are where you're supposed to be. Like, don't question, like, if you miss that flight, don't question, well, why am I late? Why did I miss that flight? Why did this happen? Those life experiences are things that you need to go through to grow as a person, and you are where you are supposed to be. And the other thing he said is, a lot of people will never understand you and they won't get what you're saying. 10, 15 years later, they'll come back and said, oh, Sandra said XYZ and you were right.
Yeah.
But you don't need validation from people.
No.
And so you need to live your truth and you need to live your life and you need to know that you've got a bigger purpose here than even maybe you recognize at times.
Yeah.
And I want to say that to you tonight as well, because I really appreciate you coming on here and just opening up your heart, opening up your life, and sharing all of these personal details. Because, Nicole, there are a lot of people who have suffered, and they've suffered silently. And I know this because I know my own personal experiences. And I also know the number of people that come to me all the time. And they say, Sandra, I don't know where you find the courage, but I can't speak out.
And that's okay.
Yeah. But know that these people are silently supporting you. A couple of weeks ago, we did an expose on someone on this island, and it's still on Facebook, so everybody can go and view it. And there were a couple of people who were doggedly making negative comments in the post. But the number of people that messaged me afterwards and said, you are the single reason that people in this community know that this person's a con artist, know that they have some sort of affinity for underage girls, know all of this stuff about them. You are the single reason why people should now be informed and aware. And if you can just take away that one positive thing from any situation, that you have touched people, although they can't publicly support you or they can't publicly come forward, they have still been impacted by what you've done. So I want to thank you, Nicole, from the bottom of my heart this evening for coming on here and sharing with us some of what you've been through. I want to offer you continued prayers and good wishes on your journey.
Thanks. I have those two outstanding issues of the U.S. federal court with the long-term disability company and then William Strample's trial that's expected to start at the end of May. And so I need those thoughts and prayers. And I pray to God that my honesty continues to serve a really good purpose that's so much bigger than me. This is a second chance at life for me. I wasn't guaranteed this. I see how fragile life is, and my God, Sandra, can you please stop pushing so many photos of accidents on Cayman Marl Road? I'm like, don't look. No, it needs awareness, and that's something else that if you ever need somebody to come talk about just how fragile life is. Like, people think they're invincible and nothing's ever going to happen to them, but life is such an incredible gift every day. No matter how much hard stuff you're going through, there's so much to be grateful for. And I just pray to God that this does reach those people who need to know that they're not alone and that they are worthy and deserving of the love that they may have never experienced before. But that love that my grandma gave to me, that unconditional, guiding, non-judgmental love, that is what you deserve in life. And that's what I pray for every single one of your listeners.
Thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome. So much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up there. Thursday's program, of course, we'll be back here on Thursday at 7 p.m. At this particular time, I can only commit to 2 shows for the week. And there's been a lot going on that we can discuss. There's a lot going on with the whole Cayman Airways, the 737 MAX 8s, and Boeing. I just saw someone sent me a post that they were having some dialogue about doing a software update. I mean, if it's as simple as a software update, you have to wonder why hundreds of people have lost their lives. I mean, it seems really, really crazy. So we can have some of those discussions on Thursday's show. And as usual, I will post at least 24 hours in advance the show details, what will be coming up, what's going to be discussed, and if we have any scheduled guests. Again, Nicole, thanks so much for joining in. And folks, I wish you a wonderful evening and safe evening. And I'll see you guys again Thursday evening at 7 o'clock.
Shit goes down. epiphany. Breaking if it hits the ground. I gotta find a way out. Oh, it's a sinking symphony. Playing as the ship goes down. It's a porcelain epiphany. Breaking if it hits the ground. I gotta find a